Welcome to Pacific Praise this morning. I'm talking with youth pastor Sunia Pasi from Manukau New Life. Welcome to the show this morning. First of all, what village, where did you grow up?
Basically grew up in South Auckland, Manurewa, on Browns Road. My parents are from Manukau and Kolofa'o, both born in Tonga and migrated to New Zealand in the 70s. My father was in the Maopa band there, and my mum was part of the choir, the King's Choir, and obviously they met while performing. Mum and Dad come from two different backgrounds. Mum's a Methodist and Dad's a Seventh-day Adventist, but wouldn't really practice it, and he wouldn't normally go to church, whereas Mum, on the other hand, would also go along with her. And the differences between the two services obviously was a language barrier. Growing up, I understood Tongan, but as I attended school, we started speaking English and really fell away from the language, wasn't able to speak it as fluently as I used to. And
Did you experience any troubles or difficulties during your childhood?
Yeah, like every young teen, you like to try out new things, and obviously experimenting with different things, with alcohol and smoking and all the rest of it. I joined the local gang, which became part of my family, and purely because I had an absent father who worked long hours, and at the time I didn't understand the financial situation. There was a lot of pressure on both of my parents. We had a house, and because they had to work long hours, the relationship suffered. They weren't seeing each other as much. We weren't doing any family activities together or family trips as we used to, and so we started to notice that there was a rift in the family. My parents would come home from work and just argue about the bills and about us, and at times I didn't feel like I was wanted or didn't feel like I was part of the family, and so I decided to go out and look for another family, and so I found it within my friends, and they became my family, hence the reason why I joined gangs. We were getting into some serious stuff and drug dealing and getting into some gang fights, and there would be times, weekends, when we'd go out and would take weapons with us, and we'd get into fights, and there'd be times when I'd wonder if I'd be able to come home alive, because some of these fights were pretty violent. And so when my parents divorced, basically left to Papatoe, which took me right out of the environment, away from all my friends, and I began a new life away from that gang life. So it was God's timing and all of that.
Mm. Do you think that's a common draw card for our PI boys and girls?
Yeah, family's a huge part of our culture, particularly back in the islands. We are so close with our family members, and so if we feel disconnected in any way, we try to resolve that by through other things, by joining gangs or hanging out with friends that we shouldn't be. So.
I'm talking to Sunia Pasi from Manukau New Life Church in Manurewa. Sunia, where did you encounter and how did you encounter the living God?
At the age of 17, my parents divorced, and things were pretty tough for me emotionally and physically. It was my last year of high school, and I found that year was one of the hardest years of school. Not sure where I was going after I left school. So after I finished at Manurewa High School in my year, I went off the rails a bit, not sure where I was going in life, and I was a cleaner for a time. Then I worked for Courier Post and got into that sort of lifestyle, and it was always partying, boozing up, and fast living. And I did that for 7 years, and for 7 years I'd just been going out every weekend and not sure of where I was going to wake up the next day, and that's how tough it was. I thought partying was a way of living, and it was a way of masking my pain and hurt. And at the age of 24, I remember waking up from being hungover, and I was just laying in bed thinking to myself, man, there's got to be more to life than this way of living. And as I lay there in the bed, I was just sent up a silent prayer, and I hadn't prayed to God for a long time. Yeah, I attended church services most times, but that would be when I needed to go to church and when I needed God, and I felt that at those times I was really desperate, but as I laid in bed that morning, I can remember saying to God, God, I just want to have a life full of purpose, and I wanted to do something for you. And I can remember just waking up from that morning and going about my day, and then I got an offer to go down to Gisborne out to see my family, and a cousin of mine was going to her school ball, and she had asked if I could take her to the ball in my fast car, and sure enough I did. I went over to Gisborne, and I had every intention of just living it up, partying, staying up late, getting silly. And then I can remember waking up on that Sunday morning. I was laying in bed, and my cousin was next to me, and we had just been out on the town, and as we laid there, another cousin of ours walked through the door and said, "Hey guys, it's time to get up, we're going to church." And I can remember lying there in bed and thinking to myself, man, here we go again. Always Sunday church. It's something that I always remember my mum coming into the room saying, "Hey son, it's time to get up, we've got to go to church." But on this occasion it was different. My cousin turned to me and said to me, "Hey bro, we got to do this. We got to do it for the family. Let's all get up and go to church." And I thought to myself, okay, it's just 1 hour I can live through. So I got up, got myself washed up, and had no spare clothes at all. So I had to just wear what I wore the night before, which smelled of smoke and alcohol. And it was a terrible feeling. As I walked into the church of the House of Breakthrough at Elim in Gisborne, I could feel a sense of peace in that place, and I saw the people, and I saw the smiles, and saw their faces, and I saw how welcoming they were, and I thought to myself, man, this is different. I haven't been to a church like this before. And so I made my way into the church, and as they were worshiping and singing songs and praising God, I could just feel something shift in my heart. And I sat through the service, and I was just listening intently to the preacher, and he was talking about the importance of being planted in the church. And at the time, I didn't realize what he was talking about. I just thought it was a really good talk, really good speech. And at the end of that message, he gave the invitation for people who want to know Jesus. And I've never experienced that again myself. And as he gave that invitation, he got us all to stand, and I could feel my heart moving around inside me, and I felt like I needed to respond to that. So I stood in the aisle, and I was with my family, my cousins, and as I looked down the aisle, I could see one of my cousins look at me and say to me, I think that's for you. I think you should go up, and that's the push that I needed to go up and respond. And so I stepped out of the aisle and walked down the middle towards the preacher, and as I approached the preacher, my heart was just racing. Sweat was coming through my hands and the pores of my head. And I can remember standing there in front of this preacher, and he said to me, "Hey, I think it's awesome that you responded. It's great to have you here. Just would ask you to pray with me." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I prayed this prayer of salvation, and I received the Lord that morning, and I could just feel a sense of freedom. I felt like a weight, a burden was taken off my shoulders. And I can remember walking out of that place a new man, and that day was the day of new beginnings and a new life in Christ.
Fantastic. What a transformation. What happened when you even came back to South Auckland?
For me, I understood that there's a huge change. I had known that something that had changed within me. Jesus was now living in my heart, but my situation at home hadn't changed. I had a girlfriend at the time, and so I had to think about her. And I can remember coming back from the church happy, and we celebrated with a big meal, as we always do. We had a big feed, and I can remember on the drive home, God was speaking to me as I was driving home. It was a 6-hour drive, and I spent those 6 hours just talking with God and just loving on Him. And then came the time when I had to think about things at home, like work and my family situation and my girlfriend. And I felt God was saying to me, you need to let her go. You need to, if you're going to live a new life in me, you're going to have to let her go and move on. Things are going to have to change at work. You're going to have to do this and do that. And things need to happen in your family. And so God was talking to me about all these different things on the way back home from Gisborne. And I was just so amazed. But I was fearful at the time because he was asking me to do a lot. I felt there was a huge cost, a price to pay, and there was a huge sacrifice in that. And so I had to make a few changes as of Monday, and so I did. I confessed to one of the friends at work who was a Christian at the time. I said to him, hey, I went to Gisborne, and I went out partying, and on Sunday I went to church, and I asked Jesus to come into my heart. And he was so happy at the time. He was celebrating with me. He was so overwhelmed, and he said to me that he had been praying for me and praying that I would come to know the Lord, and that was awesome. I was really encouraged by that. So things were changing at work. At home, my sisters could notice a slight change in my behavior. I wasn't as angry and nasty towards them, and over the weeks I knew it was going to be time. Time would tell the change that had taken place in my heart. And so with my girlfriend, on the other hand, that was pretty tough, because for a year we'd been going out and we'd made plans to live together and to get married and to have children and all the rest of it. But I had to come home and basically break the bad news to her and say, hey, things have happened in my life, things have changed. There's some things that I need to do, and the first thing I need to do is break up with you and move on in life. I know it's going to be hard for both of us, but it's going to have to happen. And so, yeah, there were huge changes that had taken place the weeks following from my conversion and knowing the Lord.